The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining our School on Wheels workshop today, What You Need to Know About Family Homelessness. My name is Amanda Carr and I'm the Engagement Specialist at School on Wheels, and I have with me Sylvia Williams from the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. Just a few notes before we get started. For purposes of sound quality, all participants are currently muted. You have the ability to ask a question at any time using the question pane, so simply type in a question and press send. We'll choose the order of questions and read them out loud. You may also wish to use headphones for better sound. Sylvia Williams is a Homeless Systems Analyst with the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, LAHSA. During her 15 years at LAHSA, she has worked with all homeless populations with a concentration on homeless family solutions system. And for the past 5 years, victims of domestic violence. She has worked in public services for most of her career with the Los Angeles Housing Department. Welcome, Sylvia, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Amanda. I appreciate that. Well, good afternoon, folks, and I want to, although my specialty is families, I want you to understand that LAHSA also works with various populations. We work with the veterans, we work with single individuals, as well as TAY, which is transition age youth, which are also all part of the homeless system throughout the LA County area. So we'll get started. First of all, we'll go through what it is and what we do basically with this PowerPoint, and I'll be happy to answer as many questions as I possibly can at the end of this presentation. Our vision as the family system at LAHSA is that no family goes unsheltered, and to reduce the length of time that a family experiences homelessness. Our goal is to reduce it to about 45%. Are we there yet? Not quite. We're working toward that goal, of course. To coordinate with community-based resources, we're supposed to support families and to rapidly rehouse them into permanent housing as well. The need of homeless families are met using a system of care that is a network of service providers that covers all of the Los Angeles County. Our guiding principles are coordinated systems of care, coordinated access, regional collaboration, building economic and housing stability, and targeted intervention. So what does the coordinated system of care? It's a regional-based program for homeless families that provide rapid rehousing and ongoing case management for community reentry and stabilization. Our family system consists of 8 we have 8 systems located throughout the Los Angeles County, and we call them the FSCS. And it's our entry based on the regional location. We have 8 SPAs in Los Angeles County, which stands for Service Planning Areas, is what SPA stands for. So we've centrally located these 8 family systems throughout LA County, and based on the client or the family that needs assistance, they will go directly to the nearest FSC. And we'll get to near the end, I'll share with you how the families actually enter the system. Coordinated access, streamline assessment and triaging the families to housing and resources for homelessness. Regional collaboration, partnerships across public and private entities that ensure homeless families are fully supported and connected to permanent housing and services within their respective communities. Building economic and housing stability. That's to facilitate, connect to income, employment, and education that provides financial resources to achieve long-term housing stability. And of course, targeted intervention, individualized housing and services to assist and assistance based on each homeless family's ability to obtain and maintain permanent housing. Here are the names of the actual FSCs throughout LA County. In SPA 1, we have Valley Oasis. SPA 2, we have LA Family Housing, as well as Bridge to Homes. In SPA 3, we have Union Station Homeless Services. SPA 4, we have PATH. St. Joseph Center in SPA 5, along with Upward Bound House. Weingart Spa 6 and Shields for Family. And Spa 7, it's Whole Child, and Spa 8 is Harbor Interfaith. I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with these agencies, but they are our partners and providers that have provided the services throughout LA County. These are some of the services that the FSCs will provide. They will provide crisis housing. They provide triage and screening of the families once they enter the system. They have direct access to crisis housing. We have standardized assessments whereby we actually sit with the clients, and there's a series of questions that we will go through with the family to determine what type of housing best suits them. A lot of it depends on the barriers. Some families have medium barriers, some families have much higher barriers, which will also determine how long they will stay in rapid rehousing as well as enriched housing, or if there's a housing available that will take them directly into permanent housing. And that has a lot to do with a lot of whether it's mental health issues or substance abuse problems and things of that nature will determine the type of housing. Some of the families will maybe, depending on whether or not there's employment, if they have employment, how long they will need to save their funds or work with mainstream benefits to obtain further funding to assist them to maintain and provide and pay for housing. Of course, there will be families that will, of course, receive Section 8 vouchers that will supplement their housing. We coordinate with community-based supportive services and housing plans, and we work with DPSS and CalWORKS resources. These are all of some of our partners that in the past with family housing, our system was basically siloed. Everyone did their own thing, and it was very difficult for families to actually come together, to come in one location, to go directly to one location and receive all the services that they needed. At one point, they would have to travel all across the county just to obtain documents and things of that nature. Well, with the FSCs, we've basically determined and come up with a way whereby all of our partners can be co-located and are co-located at each of these FSC locations. Our service providers, or the services that are provided by our partners, is rapid rehousing. That's supported by supportive services for veteran families, First 5 supportive services for Los Angeles and Family Fund. Of course, that fund is sunsetting, and we have other opportunities and programs that are coming in to actually replace some of that funding. We have our Continuum of Care Rapid Rehousing Funds. We have housing choice vouchers available, COC housing opportunity, low-income housing, permanent supportive housing, and our providers also can help the families with child care, behavioral health services, educational, vocational training, and job placement, as well as physical health services and legal services and domestic violence services. Now, the way the families access the services is through 211. So at any point, any time throughout LA County, if a family will call 211, 211 will direct them to the nearest FSC. That is based on their zip code, because of course our main objective is to keep the family in the area whereby they have their support, whether it's the kids in school or maybe family support that helps take care of the children, that babysit, or relatives maybe, or their community where they feel the most comfort, where they're comfortable. And of course, that's based on their last known address, and that's how we determine how and where the family, what FSC the family will be directed. I also want to mention that there are other ways that families can enter the system, and that's through their mental health service providers, if they're receiving mental health services, or through another program. Another family program can also direct or referral the families. But that's the process and the way that a family enters the system in order to get the best services available. So with that, I'll open the floor for questions. Of course, there's my information and whereby I can be contacted, and also the address for to actually check out the website. I simply wanted to lay the foundation so that you can see the process. I'm sure there's lots of questions that will lead to other questions that I'm more than happy to open up the floor for questions.
Okay, so we had some questions come in during the registration process, and thank you, Sylvia, for giving us an overview of the services that you offer along with the partners. I think that our tutors are really interested in the ways that kind of their families are impacted and kind of like what's being done for those families. But I do have some questions here about I would love to learn more about how to be approachable or unassuming as possible to ensure the student and her mother, his or her mother, feel comfortable around me. So a question that's a little bit more about the kind of emotional impact of homelessness, and how you would say, as a professional, how would you, if you have any advice for this tutor about, talking to the family or, not talking to the family about certain issues.
My suggestion is let the family guide that situation. Some families are very, very embarrassed about this situation, that they're even in that particular situation. I'm sure they're appreciative of the services and the tutoring that are being provided, but I think you can let them lead that. I wouldn't just begin to ask a series of questions, but allow the family, and I believe that the more, if you're consistent with that family, you show up for the tutoring, you're there with them on a consistent basis, they begin to trust you and will begin to open up and share. There are resources available whereby I can direct you to, and if a situation or question arises and you feel that you might be able to seek out help or assistance for them, by all means, let them know that you look into it for them and try. But I think it depends on the trust that they have in you and your consistency. So.
Absolutely. That's great advice. I think it's always important to not pry into a family's privacy, but, to know that you're supportive. The other question that I have here is, similar to that, but, it's also related to what the tutor could do for the family's long-term success. Is there anything that a tutor can help to offer for a family going through a homeless situation?
Well, many families, depending on the type of housing that they're currently in at the time while tutoring, it could be crisis housing, which sometimes may only last 90 to 100 days. So you may spend a short period of time with that family. But the time you spend with them, if you're providing the family with access to perhaps websites that are available for the kid to continue their learning, Khan Academy and things of that nature, as they progress in their learning, just having resources that they can always go to that are free. And maybe if it's written down on a piece of paper that they can hold on to, or library hours, what's available at some of the local libraries, providing information that they may not need now, but later they may need, and explain that to them. But just being available, and also School on Wheels will always, it will always be a place where they could possibly reach out to you and inquire about services. But because of the length of time that you might spend with a homeless family is maybe limited if it's crisis housing or even temporary housing, or now if it's permanent housing, that's different, because more than likely they'll spend a lot more time, and then you can provide the assistance on an as-need basis. But that would be, and I don't know if I've really answered that question, but it's just providing resources that they can reach, that they can go or look for on a regular basis.
Absolutely, and I think it's really important because not everybody knows that those resources exist for education, and our tutors definitely are a wonderful spokespeople for the resources that we have, and we do offer on our website lots of resources they can check out too, so that's great. Unfortunately, we don't tutor students once they reach permanent housing. the tutors are welcome to continue with them, but they would no longer be under the auspices of School on Wheels at that point. They would just kind of be on their own. But we do have tutors that do stay with their students throughout many years of transition. But normally I think our average spent tutoring one student is about 4 months, but that student might move to another location and get tutoring from somebody else, and that does kind of continue the process.
Yes, as long as the same teaching philosophy and the process and the program that's made available to the students is consistent, then I think they'll have confidence in the tutors and the services you provide.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. So I have a couple more questions that are coming in. So what percent are currently homeless, and do you see them come back in again for the same services?
You're referring to recidivism, and I think about a year ago, the recidivism rate for homelessness was about 6%. Currently, we have we use a system called HMIS, which is the Homeless Management Information System. And what that does is it provides us with information and stats and statistics on the families that we serve, and the process and the time it takes them from the time they come through the front door until they exit to permanent housing. And then again, if that family shows up again within a certain period of time, which will then be determining the recidivism rate for us. So the last that I was about 6% for the homeless population. Now for families, I think that percentage was less, maybe, or it is definitely less. In fact, based on our recent count, we've had a reduction in family homelessness of 18% from last year to this year. So we're working at it, and of course our veteran homelessness has gone down tremendously from the beginning of that, the concentration of actually working with in reducing veteran homelessness. So I would put that rate around 6% currently.
Interesting. No, that's great. And I did read the report, and those are great statistics that the family homelessness is going down. I was, just as a personal kind of question, it's interesting to me that, there's so much visibility surrounding veteran homelessness, and it seems to me that sometimes family homelessness isn't as highlighted, and is there a reason for that? Or maybe am I just seeing the wrong things, or, it's in my mind, or, or is there kind of a reason for that?
I think the reason for it was because of the veterans going to war and a lot of the bad press that they were getting and not being served when they returned home. Right. That these people would go to war and they would come back and they were homeless and on the streets. And how could that be? It was an outrage that our country basically put in the forefront. How could these people go to war for our country and then come back and then they on the streets, and their families are not receiving assistance? So as a result of some pretty bad press behind that, our government and the Veteran Affairs dumped quite a bit of money into the veteran situation and the services that they were receiving. There was quite a few, not just with homelessness, but in general. There was some bad press about how they were being treated for medical services and all of those different things. So as a result of that, they started to provide vouchers for veterans and their families and so on and so forth. And there was a mandated or a date set by Congress to end veteran homelessness throughout the nation. Some major cities and have ended veteran homelessness. Here in California, we were looking to probably end that by the end of this year. Veteran homeless, that is, and family homeless and youth homeless and chronic homelessness, all are on a schedule based on the HUD's guide called Opening Doors. And there is and it started in 2009, was the beginning of that particular book or program that HUD has basically put out nationwide for ending homelessness. So of course that was of course put in the forefront. However, families homelessness as well as TAY and youth homelessness is also in the forefront as well. And as a nation, we're moving to end that. Hence why, we've started with FSCs and also the way HUD is shifting funding toward more permanent supportive housing and permanent housing for the homeless. So we're moving. It's a tough road to hoe, if you will, and especially here in California when the vacancy rate for housing is less than 3%. And the folks that are going after that are folks like you and I that can pay market rents. And when we're trying to assist those that are less fortunate with less funds to try to find housing, it's really tough. So we have a housing problem here in Southern California as far as providing housing for our families. They're, because of that, they're having to stay in crisis housing a little longer than we normally would like them to. And so our goal is to try to provide them with as much as we can at one location. For instance, with our FSCs, we have co-located at each location. We have a mental health clinician. We have Department of Public Health clinician there. We have DPSS at each of these locations. So when a family comes through the door, they're immediately assessed, and then they're determined whether or not, or we basically explain to each family that we understand the stressful situation they're in, and perhaps maybe speaking with a mental health clinician would help them, and perhaps there are services that could be made available to them. They can volunteer for that or not. They can say yes or no. Generally, we want them all to go to DPSS to determine whether or not they're CalWORKs eligible, if they're GAIN eligible, if they can receive all the mainstream benefits from food stamps to public assistance. If they have children that special needs, if there's how to apply for SSI benefits and so on and so forth. So those are the things that when they walk through through a door to family systems, walk into a family solutions system center's doors, these are the services that can be provided with. Also, in addition to that, then be directed to crisis housing, where they will go for 90 to 100 days. And during that time, they're being case managed. And the case managers are working with them to find housing, to get employment, to work out any situations, get paperwork done. If they have evictions, to work with landlords to try to get them into housing with perhaps working with legal aid to remove the evictions if possible, or at least to talk to the property owners on the family's behalf. Basically, I'm working with the Jones family and they have an eviction, but they have us to wrap around them and to provide help and services to them. So in other words, if we can assist this family and you have problems, you can come to us. We can try to resolve these issues for them, or help them, or try to resolve the issue so that you feel better about renting to them or explaining. Sometimes we just send the client to talk to the actual landlord to determine, and the landlord determines whether, based on how they communicate with them, if the reason why they received an eviction is due to some unforeseen situation that happened. So perhaps those are some of the things that we do to assist and help the families.
Great. That's really good to know that they have that kind of advocacy, because I think sometimes, at least when you're tutoring, you don't know what's going, what kind of access the family has to that, and it sounds good to me. So I have another question here. I worked with a student who moved, and I don't know where yet. Is there any help looking for families offered? So would that be confidential, or if the tutor is working with a student and the student just kind of disappears, is there anything that your organization does to?
There's nothing we can do.
Yeah.
And it happens, unfortunately. Sometimes they move, or they have to leave a location for whatever reason, or an opportunity comes up. A family somewhere else may have said, come back home or come here, and it could be out of the region, or move to another city, and of course they didn't leave any information. It's always good to give them your email address or information, and if they want to reach out to you, that they can. So whatever information you want to divulge or give to the family of the student is always, up to you to determine that. And basically say, if you ever leave the area, if you move away and you want, perhaps I can come to you, just reach out to me, give me a call or email me, or I can always be reached at, through School on Wheels.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think that we do try to stress that to the tutors, that sometimes families move without forewarning, and there's really nothing we can do. And I understand that the privacy, and also you might not even know. So that's great. I have some more questions coming in. Well, this question you kind of already answered, but is your organization involved in advocacy as well?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. How do you keep available enough resources? Are families ever turned away or not able to access resources?
Unfortunately, yes, because we are at max here, Southern California, actually, and some families are. But what we do, what the case managers will do at the FSCs, if a family comes in, is basically inquire about, is there anyone that they can call on their behalf? We do something called diversion, and usually that's when sometimes we get folks that come to the door that really are not homeless. They're either doubled up or they've had a fight with family and they want to just get away from home. And we want to try to avoid families coming into the homeless systems altogether. But at the same time, we can still provide some services with them being outside of the system. But when they're turned away as a result of no place to, as a result of capacity, then we will try to make calls on their behalf to maybe family members or friends, and basically let them know that we're working with them, that they're connected to a system whereby we're assisting that family to ultimately get into permanent housing, if they could remain with them or stay with them for an extended amount of time until something is available. But we're still providing some sort of services. But a lot of times when a family comes to the door, they need to be immediately housed or a place to go, and they don't want the extra, or they think that a conversation wouldn't help. But a lot of times you'll be surprised if someone calls on behalf of that family. Maybe they burned a few bridges, but knowing that ultimately they may be self-sufficient and they're being helped might, buy them some time to go back home or go live with a family or a friend. So it's always it's worth the risk. It's worth the time to take to actually try it.
Yeah, because I've heard a lot of, there's been a lot of talk about construction in LA and the kind of resistance from some sectors of the population, resistance against kind of like large, low-income housing. So, what effect does that have on your operations? And as far as the rapid rehousing plan, how is that going forward? What is the plan? Where would those housing units be, and how would that affect our families?
Well, a lot of our family solution centers have what we call housing locators, and these are people that will go out into the community and talk to landlords and folks that own properties, and basically appeal to their social side, and to basically say, this is the services we'd like to rent. We're hoping you will rent to our clients, and these are the services that our clients are receiving. This is where we're guiding and leading, and will you rent to these clients and to these families? And once they know that particular family has an organization backing them, sometimes they will allow our families in, and sometimes we rent units and we rapidly rehouse families there for a period of time, where a part of the rent is paid by, a certain percentage of the rent is paid by the organization, and another percentage is paid by the family. And then of course that's tapered off, and eventually they can have that unit in their own name,
right,
where it becomes their permanent housing placement. Or they remain there for a time while they continue to save their resources and start to look for housing on their own, or with the help of the housing locator, and find housing for those families as well. So that's a process that we're working on as well, and where we're providing financial assistance to the families while they're saving their resources, looking for employment, and so on and so forth.
Okay, great. Let's see. Is there a wait list for shelters usually?
We don't like wait lists, but what we do have, what the agencies are providing, and I guess it is a wait list, I suppose, but we generally don't like them to go out more than 2 weeks, is to give the family a date and time when they can come in for services. What we always like to encourage the families is to definitely go back for that appointment. Don't miss that appointment, because then they can be assessed and determine basically the barriers. And of course, if a family is sleeping in their car or in a park and not in a place not in for human habitation, of course they're given priority. But if families are living with other family and friends, of course we basically try to encourage them to stay where they are, and we give priority to those that are actually on the streets or sleeping in their cars or not in a place meant for human habitation.
Great. Do you have any outreach for families that might not know about services but are living in places like parks and cars? And
we have outreach workers that outreach staff, and when they find a family or locate a family, they will inquire if they're interested in going into housing. And those that are willing and want to, we will connect them to housing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Let's see. So this is a question that's a little bit related to the rapid rehousing. Are we moving towards rapid rehousing in LA versus Section 8 vouchers? If so, has this been more successful?
We still have Section 8 vouchers. There are not many of them, but there are still vouchers available for families depending on their barriers and where they qualify in the vulnerability index. So there are vouchers. And we are doing rapid rehousing, because that's basically a financial assistance to the family while they increase their income, as well as get employment if they're not employed. And so it's a means to moving them into self-sufficiency, into permanent housing.
Okay, great. So what is the best thing, this is another question related to tutoring, and what if the family asks for clothing? Should we point them as tutors towards 211 or look for more local resources?
211 can help with that. 211 can help with a lot of resources, and a lot of organizations that are well known, Catholic Charities, Goodwill, and in Salvation Army. A lot of the shelters that are in the communities also will have a place, a thrift store available, whereby they will provide the families with housing, with clothing, as well as other needs if they're moving into housing, bedding and kitchenware and things of that nature.
Okay, great. What does it mean? So this is, again, I think maybe a little bit you already answered, but what does it mean when if a family says that they are waiting for a voucher?
I'm assuming when they say that, they're working with an agency and that they have applied for the voucher. So they are connected if they're saying they're waiting for a voucher, because that's the only way. You have to get into the system and be assessed and apply, and then that's the process. If they're waiting for a voucher, some people have vouchers and can't find housing. So, but if they're waiting for a voucher, then I'm assuming they have already applied through one of the service providers, and they're simply waiting for approval.
Yep. So these families would probably already be in like a temporary housing.
They're already connected and in temporary
but they're
housing.
waiting for like a Section 8 voucher. Okay, great. Other questions? Don't be shy, audience. You can type it in right now. One question I had that kind of came up, you talked about barriers to housing. You talked about mental illness and drug addiction as two of those barriers. I wonder if you could speak a little bit more to the effect that those barriers might have on the children in these families. How are those barriers breached or managed?
A lot of times those are some of the things that led to the homeless situation in the beginning sometimes. It's not always, but it could be. And it could be a barrier in that if the head of household isn't basically receiving services to address those issues, a lot of our service providers are mandated reporters, so it could very well cause them to lose their family, their children, if they're not, doing the things, if it appears that the children are at risk and are in danger. So that could be very well be a barrier. Issues like being undocumented could be a barrier, but that doesn't stop our service providers from providing services. It becomes an issue because now we're working with someone that may not be able to get employment because of their documentation, that they're not documented. But that doesn't stop the service providers from assisting families.
Okay, great. Is it hard to keep families in the same area if they prefer? It seems like LA families are often end up in remote parts of the valley.
It's where they lived last. It's where their last permanent address, and that's one of the first questions that 211 will ask. Where did you live last? What was the zip code? And based on that zip code, that's the FSC they would work with. And they have to. It's important because of our system. It's a system that has to work for the entire county. Therefore, we try to keep families in those areas. Sometimes families want to jump from one spot to the other, and there is a way to determine that that's happening. So it's important that the families find the FSC and work with them because that's everything they need is there if they're willing to work the program and actually become self-sufficient. There's everything they need, the services that they will need can be provided to them there. What they can do is begin to save their resources, and perhaps if they desire to move to another place, or if there's another family member or an area that they'd like to move to, they can perhaps get referrals to landlords and locations in that area. But in the meantime, to become self-sufficient and save their monies, whatever issues that they have, work on those things as far as the children and things like that. But generally, for the most part, if they're homeless in an area and their children are school age, they're in school in that area as well. So generally, maybe it's during the summer they'd like to move to another city or something like that. But then it's all part of the family can determine and dictate what they want. It's their call. But when they're receiving services, it's based on the area that they last live. So.
And probably also availability. If there was no availability in that area, they would kind of have to be moved to another area, or?
No, we generally leave them in that area unless there's some safety reason. If a family happens to be fleeing domestic violence, then that would be an alternative for leaving that particular area. But as long as their support and the schools are in that area, that's more than likely. All of our FSCs are capable and very well managed by managers, and the co-located staff that are at these locations are quite capable of providing the services that the families will need.
Okay. Does LAHSA serve homeless teens who are separated from their families?
Yes, that's handled by a coworker of mine. We're all called Homeless Systems Analysts, and we have a group that are called youth. They're the youth system, and it's 16 to 25 to their 25th birthday, and there are 18 to 25 the services that they can provide in shelters and so on and so forth. And that can be done through going through our website and locating who those providers are. And
got it. Great. So we'll wrap it up. But we just wanted to know, what is the best, or what is the hardest part of your job? Just tell us.
The hardest part of our job is finding housing here in Southern California. We need more housing and more resources. And that's the hard part, because you never want to turn a family away. Because when they're coming to you, they're in need, especially those that are living in parks and in cars and on the street. That's the tough part, talking with families and basically having to say to them that there's no place to go. That's tough.
Absolutely. What about the best part?
The best part is finally giving them keys and watching them take the keys to their own place when they actually are permanently housed and they have keys in hand and they have shelter.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. This was a great workshop, so informative. Thank you, everybody, for attending today. If you do have any further questions from Sylvia, her email is right up there on the screen, and we will be putting this presentation up on our workshop library. It should be up there within a few days, and I will email everyone to let you know when it's up there. So again, thank you, and have a great day, everybody. Until next time.